and happy Friday. I'm so grateful that you are here today. Thanks for joining me for the Empowered Music Room. This is week 2, and I'm really happy to be here with you. I hope you enjoyed that music as we started the um, the entry room or the coming into this today. That's music from dear Evan Hansen. It's called "You Will Be Found," and you are not alone. And I don't know about you, but I'm going on a year of online teaching, and sometimes it feels pretty isolating. And well, now I just realized I've been talking to myself and I was muted this whole time. Um, I'll start over. Thanks for being here today. In spite of doing this over and over, I've just proven it can be challenging to handle all the technology. But I hope you enjoyed the music as you came in here today. That was music from Dear Evan Hansen, a song called "You Will Be Found," and the words that come over and over at the end, "You are not alone, you are not alone," and a reminder of that as you do this hard work as music educators. I feel pretty alone and isolated a lot of the time right now because I'm going on a year here of teaching online band, and so an opportunity to share what I'm learning with other people like this right now is important in us connecting from wherever we are, and sharing our best practices and helping one another, because that's what music educators do best. So I will go ahead and teach. I've got a 5-week course, if you will, or 5 weeks of this that I'm doing. Um, and my goal with you was last week, if you were here, I outlined the Empowered Music Room, and it's what I've come to the conclusion after teaching for 33 years, over 30,000 classes. There's basically a format that has helped me be the most effective teacher and helping my students be the most engaged and keeping my stress levels and theirs manageable. And it's, if you will, as I teach you about the empowered classroom and the components of it, think of it as the template for a blues solo. If I was going to teach you to improvise, I would start with a form and help you work within that form. I would teach you what the different parts of the structure are, what the tonic chord versus the subdominant and the dominant things. They each serve a different purpose, and you need each of them to have a successful blues chorus, correct? Now, once you learn the blues, you can then extend it, you can alter it and do all kinds of things, but you got to learn the blues first. And then you can play the blues in all kinds of situations, in a big band, in a small combo, by yourself on a harmonica. You can be flexible once you understand the format and really own it. That's what I've done with the Empowered Music Room. I analyzed what has been successful for me and for my students and for my clients that they use with their students. And I've now created it in a way where I want to take you through that. Last week, I shared each of the components. I'll briefly tell you what they are. We're going to dig into one of them deeply this week. And by the end of this, you will have an awareness of already how you do this, and then maybe how to refine it or use it differently or more advantageously to help you help your students better. It'll make more sense as we go on. Let me do a quick screen share here and show you a little recap. All right, so the pieces of the Empowered Music Room, um, right here, and I identify an empowered music room as a place where not just the kids, but our own social and emotional needs are supported, so we can be our best versions of ourselves as teachers, and our kids can do the best. If we just said to the kids, let's learn to improvise, and we gave them no structure, it'd be a hot mess. You don't know where to start. But we start with a structure. In my classroom, in when I work with people on this, here's the breakdown, if you will, the social component. It's about 10% of what we do. Pre-pandemic, this was so freaking easy to handle, right? The kids were drawn to the music making we did together in class. That covered the social component, being with their friends and making music, um, going on the trips, playing at the games, doing the concerts. Their social needs were met beyond 10, I mean, all the time. In a virtual environment, I'll go into more depth the week that we cover this, but I do a piece called You, Me, and a Cup of Tea. You may have noticed I had when you came in, I had some music playing. I tried to create a social environment to help you feel like you're part of something here as you join us here. We all have social needs to be drawn in, so I try to model that in every lesson I teach and have some kind of social component. Music is a great way to use it, even if we can't play music right now with our students in the ways we used to. We can still use music as a way to help them feel connected to others. So that's really important. Um, The focus factor, I'm gonna be focusing on this piece in depth next week. You will experience it in a few minutes here, though, because it's part of every class I teach, and I'm gonna intentionally focus us on the lesson we're gonna do here, and I'll take just 4 minutes out of this lesson, and I'm gonna actually get us focused and tune our brains and bodies for the content we're going to learn. Then about 75% of what we do is the content we deliver. Um, it's the lesson for the day. So that would be where you would teach the kids, do your rehearsal, or you would dive into a theory lesson, or do whatever you have going on there. Today, the content you're going to learn is the coda piece. So I'm going to start at the end. I'm going to start with the last step in my process and teach it to you that way. And in a little bit, I'll tell you why. Even though it's less than 5% of the time I spend in any given class period on this, it's such a critical part of these parts being successful. And just like a blues progression, which only has, the 1 chord, the 4 chord, the 5 chord, and the 5/7 chord right at its most basic, if you leave one of those out, suddenly the blues format's gonna be really weird. And if you don't have each of these components in your class, it's gonna not, uh, not go as smoothly as you want it to. It won't be predictable. When you use this, you know how things are gonna unfold. Your students have a routine they become used to. It's easier to plan, and it's easier to learn. So today we're going to talk about the coda. So today's learning about the coda is going to actually be the content I teach you. Then I'm also going to have you do the coda, which is the clear wrap up that provides feedback to inform future lessons. I use a thing called the Moffat-gram. And if you were here last week, I put that link in the chat. I took the feedback from that, and that helps drive what I teach this week. At the end of today's lesson, I will give you a Moffat-gram link, and I'll ask you to send that so I know where you're coming from. So as I plan next week's talk, I know how I can be the most successful. So I'm modeling for you the steps that we're talking about. Um, we had the music at the beginning, and now I'm going to take you into the focus piece before I actually get into the content. And as I do this, I'm going to do a little audio sound here because my husband's on a business call. And frankly, sometimes his talking gets annoying while I'm doing this. Well, maybe I'm not because it's not set up in the webinar the same way it is in my class one. So I won't do that. I was going to put some music on behind this, but what I do now, before I deliver the next piece of content and talk about the coda and how you can wrap up the end of your lessons in ways that help you, I want to take a moment to help you settle into what we're doing now. You are giving up time. Right now, a bunch of you on a Friday afternoon after you've taught all week, you think your heads might be busy and lots of things going on. I know mine is. And if you're watching this replay, it's likely on your own personal time or whatever, and you've got a lot of other things you've done. And so let's take a minute. This is part of the focus piece. I'll teach how to teach this part in another lesson, but right now, as part of this lesson, I want to help you get grounded and tune our bodies and our brains for band. So I do this routine with my students. I do it with my clients in every class, and I do it when I do these webinars. So if you join me for the next couple of minutes, now if you're driving or doing anything or your attention needs to be focused on something like that, please do not listen to my voice for the next 4 minutes. But if you are somewhere where you can close your eyes and be very relaxed, I want to invite you to do that now. I'm going to take you through the first 4 minutes of what I do in my classroom, and it should help us so that the next 20 minutes or so that we spend together are much easier for you to stay focused. So I want to invite you to bring your body to stillness in a comfortable position. Maybe you're seated, maybe you're laying down. Wherever you are, just notice how you feel in this moment. Maybe you can sense your heart rate. That's your metronome, right? So what does it feel like? And maybe for just the next few minutes, you close your eyes or soften your gaze just to block out other distractions that are around you. And just listening to the sound of my voice and focusing on what I ask you to do for a couple of minutes should help you get in a frame of mind where what we're going to do next is easier. As you breathe in and out through your nose, can you notice what it feels like on an exhale as you allow the muscles in your face and jaw and tongue to soften? Just notice what that feels like. And if you don't think you're carrying tension, just happen to notice on your next exhale what it feels like as you allow your shoulders to melt away from your ears. Is there any tension there? Just allow it to be and to go. And as your shoulders melt away from your ears, do your arms feel heavy as they rest wherever they land, with your hands in your lap or down at your side. And on your next exhale, perhaps you notice what it feels like as your back and sits bones, thighs, and feet anchor you into your chair, allowing the muscles in your body to soften towards the earth for just a couple of minutes and rest. Just notice if you feel any different than you did just a minute ago. I'm going to count from 1 to 10. And during each of those counts, perhaps you pace yourself and inhale and then exhale with each number I say, allowing yourself to relax 10 times more than you already are, just for a moment before we get back to business. 1, 2, 3. If you've come to some of my classes before, you may have done this, and so it's easier for you to relax than it might have been the first time. 4. That's part of practicing something like this on a regular basis. 5, 6. Perhaps you notice you're feeling heavier. 7. Notice where your body comes in contact with the chair, whatever you're seated on. 8, 9. Maybe on your next exhale, you allow yourself to do an open mouth sigh and let all the tension just leave your body. 10. And what we've just done is a process I do with my students every day. And I want to invite you to just stay in this moment in a relaxed state for just a moment. And notice that no matter what's going on around you, if you've taken the time to just be still and allow yourself to follow the guidance that I've invited you to do, have you been able to physically feel a little different? Imagine maybe your heart rate's a little slower. What do you think's happened to your blood pressure? Maybe the thoughts in your head have gotten a little less busy, just for a moment. If you practice this every day, you and your students, it becomes an automatic response and it makes everything else easier. But that lesson is for another day. What we're going to do next is going to require you to be a little more alert. And so I'm going to reverse that relaxation process and want to invite you to do that. I will count from 5 to 1. And while I do that, go ahead and wiggle your fingers and toes, maybe roll out wrists and ankles, get circulation going in your body, and go from the super relaxed state during the next 5 breaths. And when I go from 5 to 1, maybe you float those eyes open, and then you will feel really refreshed and focused and ready to do our next part. 5, nice big movements. 4, 3, deep yawns always feel good. 2, and 1. So that process is probably the key thing that has made my whole life easier personally and professionally. I'm going to dig into that I don't remember if I'm doing it next week or the week after, but when we talk about the focus factor, I'll teach you not just that process, but how to effectively use that in your classroom if you want to. But today I'm super excited to share with you something. I call it my Moffat-gram, the coda. Now, teaching band and, I remember meeting with my principal one time. They started all this stuff about how we had to get data, collecting data about our students and use that to inform our teaching. And I was like, wanted to vomit. I'm like, I don't collect data on my students. And I said to my principal, I was like, you want me to do more? And he said, Leslie, relax. He goes, I've watched you teach. Music teachers are constantly collecting data. You don't collect it, look at it, figure it out, and then do something the next day with it. You do it in real time. As a music teacher, you collect data through what you hear your students do, what you see them do. You correct their behaviors, you help teach them. You don't even have to stop them. You can use gestures and signals oftentimes to communicate and teach. He said, we're just big data machines. We just do it so intuitively as music educators that we don't realize it. So I felt a whole lot better about that until I became an online band teacher almost a year ago, when I can't see my students and I can't hear my students because this is the new reality. How in the world do I know what they're understanding? How do I know if they're growing? How do I know if they're even connecting and on the other end of that screen? I have to all I feel like as a music teacher, all of my senses that the 2 senses I depend the most on, my eyes and my ears, are just in this virtual setting terrifying, and that made it so hard to figure out how do I serve my students? I don't always know what they need. Sure, if they turn in an assignment, a long assignment, and they do all that, and I go and I read it all for each kid, 171 of them, then I can get that information, but that takes a long time. And I have a lot of stuff I needed to learn about the kids to figure out if I was even on the right track. And so the beginning of the year, I had to start figuring out how am I going to hear from them? And I said, and I knew I needed to hear from them every day. And I finally realized, hey, I could do something like in a Google Doc, an exit ticket, if you will. But if you call it an exit ticket, that's just, they hear that in all their classes. That doesn't stand out. It's just another thing. And so one day, when I realized what I needed to do, it was going to be through a Google survey because I needed something that could capture data, capture information, and allow me to use it to inform me of the information I needed about my students. So I came up with this idea called the Moffat-gram. And the key isn't, I'm going to show you samples of the Moffat-gram in a minute. The Moffat-gram itself isn't the cool tool. Or isn't it's not successful because of the tool it is. It's successful because of the way I introduced it and trained the students to use it so that they turn it in every single day. I've got a 95.5% return rate on these every day, 171 kids, because every day we get a Moffat-gram, not just most days, but every day. If a kid misses my class, they'll email me and say, can I get the Moffat-gram? It's not because of the points either. When I introduced this to my students at the beginning of the year, I said, you guys, I'm having a hard time. You're turning in assignments, but it takes me a long time to go through them and read them and figure out what you need. And I don't always get back to you or get the information in a timely manner. And and I was struggling. And I said, and I explained what I just told you about in band. It was easy to help them, and respond to what they needed. But I missed hearing their voices. I said, it's lonely teaching online band. I can't stand at the door of the band room with my cup of tea like I did every day when we were before the pandemic, and I could talk to you when you came in the room and ask you how your soccer game was, or find out how the uh, play rehearsal went after school, or whatever. We could have those conversations, or I could tell by your body language if you were understanding what I was teaching. I could get so much information from you, and I could see and hear you. And now that you're just a little box on a screen, and I only fit 49 at a time, so I don't even see all of you, um, it's really hard. So I said to the kids, I know y'all have the Instagrams and the Snapchats. Well, I'm going to make the Moffat-gram. And that's my way of hearing your voice. I can ask you questions every day and I can get your feedback. It'll help me plan what to teach. It'll help me know how you're feeling. And I said, I don't even know what I'm going to put in the Moffat-grams, but I'll know each day, what do I need to know from you? And then I'll put that question or questions in the Moffat-gram. And I said to the kids, it's really my only way of hearing from you. And I miss that. And so every day we'd turn them in and the next day I'd be like, and with the Moffat-grams, the first couple times I would hold it up. I would say, I'm going to give them to you now. And I hold them out until in the chat until I'm ready to give them to them. I'll say, now here's your Moffat-gram. Go ahead and do them. And when I first started doing these, I would ask the kids to don't log off, open the link that I just put there. And I would open the Moffat-gram on my screen. And I'd say, we have 61 of us logged in. So when I get 61 responses, class will be over. And so that got them in the habit, and I wouldn't say call anybody out. I would just say, "We're still waiting on 6 more. Go ahead and finish those up, and then we'll go ahead and go." It only took a few times of doing that till kids were turning them in because they just knew. I would give them to them when it was time to turn them in, and we would do it, and that got them in the habits of turning them in, and then immediately that day, I would then put 10 points in the grade book so they knew that I saw their responses, and then the next day in class, something we would be doing, I would say, "Oh, the reason we're doing this today is I got some feedback in the Moffat-gram," and I let them know how I was hearing their voices and how it impacted what I was teaching them. That helped empower them. This Moffat-gram empowered all of us, and I'm using it all the time now. So I want to show you some samples of what I've used it for. I learned some lessons the hard way because I've never been a data collector or a data user either. So I didn't even know how to use data, really. So sometimes I would ask questions that were open-ended, and then I had to read 171 or 181 open-ended responses. I learned if I needed information in a hurry to ask questions and then use like multiple choice options so I could quickly chunk things. So I used different ways of doing this. So I just pulled, I think, I don't know, 5 or 6 sample slides because every day I do this and I'm turning them into, I'm saving them each day in a document so I can go back and I can see what my kids have feedback they've given me every day. Let me just show you what I'm talking about so you can see what kind of tool this is and and it's why it's so helpful. And I'm sure you'll be able to imagine how this would work in your classroom. So this one was I created on September 25th. So we had been in school just since right after Labor Day, and I had done some Google surveys and the like, and talked to kids in breakout rooms and the like. And then I realized, and we'd set up what we were doing for the year. And then I finally realized I needed a better way of doing things. So this was my first original Moffatgram on September 25th. And I wanted to know from the students, has everyone picked an October music project? So the students were going to be doing self-directed projects, blah, 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 for the month of October. So right here, I could check and see, did I hear from all my students? And then of those kids, I have decided what I'm doing for my October music project. Now, as you're looking at this, I just have to tell you, these are just slides, screenshots, but when I'm in the active Google Docs, these will light up, right? And I can click on those and I can go, oh, some kids said, so like less than 3% of the kids said, no, they haven't decided. I immediately click on that, find out which kids they are, and I go into my notes for the next class period for that class. And and I make notes of who needs me to touch base with them personally. Or I just send a quick email. Hey, do you need help or do you want to set up a quick appointment? Whatever in the moment is the right thing to do. Then I asked, have they submitted their proposal in Canvas? This forced them to go and check. And then if they didn't turn it in, I checked in, do you need tech help? Or do you need other help? And it was easy to identify people in a hurry. Just like if you're in your band rehearsal room and a kid doesn't play their horn for 3 days, that's your sign that there's probably something else wrong. Either it needs to go to the shop, or maybe there's something else in their life that you need to help them with. Maybe they've lost their music. Maybe they can't afford reeds. But those, you can get feedback in your classroom in person in typical situations differently. I'm using this right now fully remote. I will probably incorporate it whenever we do go back in person, as ways to gather data still because it's so helpful. Then we were doing October projects, and I had gotten a grant to get a woman to come in and do a songwriting project, and I needed to know how many of my students were going to do that. So of 181 kids, boom, I could say I have this. I could do the math. 33% of them were going to do this project, so I knew about 60 kids were going to be part of that project. And I could immediately say to Emma G, you're going to have 60 kids, blah, blah, blah. And it helped me isolate the information I needed right away. And everybody turns these in because they're in the habit. Another way I've asked questions is we were approaching the end of October, mid-October. I was like, well, after the October music project, OMP, wonder what we're doing next. I never taught online band before, so I really didn't have a plan. I knew that my kids couldn't all do practicing their instruments at 8 o'clock in the morning with me because I had surveyed them back in the spring. So I knew I needed some other options. So I said, when we're finished with October music projects and presentations, which appeals to you most? And I did this survey. And again, this is a screenshot, but then most of the kids wanted to either continue working on their October music projects. Many of them were learning to play guitar and they'd find their own resources on YouTube, or they were learning various other things or arranging music or whatever they're doing. So some of them wanted to continue that independent project. Others, I gave the option. I said, I'm going to teach about Hamilton. And I showed them some resources I would use. There's a foundation out there that the Gilder Lehrman Foundation that has put together phenomenal resources for educators. And so it was a wonderful unit that I could teach the kids about the music for Hamilton. And here's what I saw. Uh, the top two things, or a couple of the top two things after the working on their project was a virtual ensemble and Hamilton, studying the musical. So I was thinking, okay, we'll study the musical first. They'll fall in love with it. And guess what we're doing now? We're doing a virtual ensemble, and they picked the music from Hamilton to do for that. They've got this emotional connection they're making now because they're loving all of this as they've been diving in, creating some emotions in the room by finding out what the kids want and then helping them um, learn through these ways. At the end of first quarter or first unit, I asked the students, I said, hey, I know there's things like Yelp reviews and all that. Give me some feedback. You don't get graded on how you vote or how you say you do. It's just if you turn it in. And so my students turned this in, and we didn't do traditional band like they all have grown to love in the room because we couldn't, but they're still satisfied or above on what we're doing. And this kid sent me a personal note saying, "The only reason I put that is because I miss band." And I'm like, "We all do, but that's okay." He's a little sad. Then as we got going, when we came back to school in January, our school district said we're going to have asynchronous Wednesdays. You can't require kids to come to class Wednesdays. You must provide something activity asynchronously, and you can be live and all this. You know, all of you have been in situations like this. So I'm like, oh my gosh, what do my kids need? So I asked them if I provided some optional Wednesday activities during our class, what would you be helpful? So they could either go and do an asynchronous lesson that I put in Canvas, or I could provide other things. And enough students said to me that if I just opened up my a Zoom room on those asynchronous days, they wanted to talk about certain things. So every Wednesday, I just have a different topic. We started with the one most of them said, tips for coping with stress in online school, I think was the first one we did. So big chunk of the kids did the asynchronous thing, and then maybe 10% came live to my classroom and did the first week was mindfulness. They asked if we could just do mindfulness the first week. And they also asked me if we could do it again right before finals. So we use those Wednesdays for something that kids can come to by choice. But I had to find out from kids, what do you need? And this helped me so that I didn't try to create activities and hope they'd show up. I found out what they needed. Then I created the activities so I knew they'd show up. And then this one was from about a month ago, asking them as we were getting ready to record a virtual band. I needed to know basic things. Were they able to download music or not? Oop, one person couldn't. I could isolate, get that music to the kid and help them out. This is how we differentiate online band teaching. These kinds of things, this Google survey option. And again, when these are not screenshots and you're actually in the Google Doc, you just click them and it tells you which kids sent that information in. Which kids did I need to get an instrument for school for? Boom, those 10 kids told me in the Moffat grant. Okay. Um, and then the kids doing their independent music projects, do they know what they're going to do for their presentation at the end of that, or do they need to talk to me, or do they need help getting started? I could find out right away through the Moffat grant. It didn't go a week or 2 or 3 before a kid got on track. It was right away. And if kids miss more than one, if they have 2 missing Moffat grams in a row, I make it a habit, immediately send them an email, copy a parent and counselor on it and an assistant I have, and we get on it because it's the habit of that, of turning it in, that allows me to keep that child engaged and I get their voice every day. Okay. And then, yeah, just a couple more things here. As we were starting our new semester, wanting to know was how's the balance between this and the rest of what they're doing? For some kids, they have too much other classwork. For some, it's just right. I can't meet all their needs, but I can see what their needs are and I can address them and give them some tips for both of these, right? Um, and then finally, over here, people on track and who aren't, how can I help them? This is helpful for me, not knowing, when we're in band class, I teach the kids band stuff, right? I can help them, I can count out rhythms, I can do all kinds of ways of teaching, but when we're remote, I had to make all kinds of different resources for my students, and I don't know what's the most helpful, so I asked them, which of the resources I've provided for you has been the most helpful? And so that allowed me to know if I do this again, what do I just start with? Breakout time room with me, not very many kids have used it, but they're getting a lot of the help they need by listening to the different recordings I've provided and all of that. So that's how I know what helps. Ah. So what I'm going to do today in just a couple of moments is put a Moffat link in this chat box to find out. I'm asking you a couple questions. This is the second week I've done the class. I'm digging in here. I'm going to ask you a question or two just so I'll know a little bit about more of the people that are coming to this so I can, if I need to adjust anything I'm teaching next week, I'll know. Last week I asked which section would be the most helpful for us to start with, and of the people that turned them in, the majority had said they had said coda and content. And because I know my program really well, I know that the coda part is will be better to introduce first because the content piece will make more sense if I've done this first. So I am going to pop in the chat box the link I have for you. I have to copy it. And it's the Moffat link. And I would love for you to take literally 5 seconds and wait, can't talk and type. And click that. You don't have to put identifying information on it or anything, but if you click that, and whether you're watching the replay or the original, any of you who actually do that would be able to give me feedback on what you would like, or what your background is here so that I can be more helpful as I go on with what we're doing. So I am really grateful to you for showing up for this. You are modeling for your students what it means to be a lifelong learner. Um, this is really hard. Whether even if you're in person teaching right now, it's probably not normal. This is not like a normal school year, and whatever your situation, hybrid, virtual, a mix of it. It's challenging. Um, but I believe that this format, just like the blues, can be used and molded and worked within your structure. You probably already have a social piece, a way you help kids focus. You know how to deliver content, and you do some kind of wrap up. But this is to give you um, the opportunity to bring it more to your awareness. How do you use this? And then when you start your lesson plans, I'm going to be teaching you, if you start with that template, just literally paste that template in as a lesson plan. And yes, I'm doing lesson plans, written lesson plans right now every day, because as an online teacher, it's harder. So pasting those, that format in, and then going, and how do you start with that? Start with, what do you want your students, and I'll teach this more in depth when we talk about content, but what you want them to know, do, and feel as a result of your lesson. That's how you do it. You build everything around that then. And when you've got a template and a way to begin all of this, then you're not starting from scratch every day. Like, how do I, what, what I hear people doing a lot of is finding an activity and then trying to figure out how then teaching it to the kids and wondering what they're going to learn, instead of saying, here's what my kids need to know, feel, and do at the end of my next class. And then it's easy to find the activity or figure out the Google terms you need to search to find an activity or to create an activity that helps you give those opportunities to your students. So that's what I love doing. Teaching is an art. That it's an art, just like being a musician. And I have found my passion, my mission in doing this. And if you're looking for support in that, I do have a group I work with, the Empowered Music Educator. Or the Music Ed Masterclass I run is a wonderful opportunity where I bring music teachers together. We meet weekly. We have a private Facebook group where we build our community and support one another, and it has been a really awesome place to be. And so, if you're looking for that kind of support, I invite you to go to empowerededucator.com/apply. That will let me know if we might be a good fit to hop on a call and see if it'd be a good fit for you. But otherwise, I would love to hear your questions or any other comments that you have. And in that Moffat there's an opportunity to send that information directly to me. I will reply right back to you if you have specific questions, or if you say to me, I'm looking for a specific idea, and you tell me what that is. If I've got something I can share, content, a rubric, a template, I am happy to share that. I am where I am today because of all of the generosity of the time and energy and resources that music teachers before me shared. My grandma was a music teacher. My dad was a high school band director for over 30 years. My parents met in the college marching band, and their honeymoon was going on a band trip. And all three of my children were in my band program, and I'm married to a trumpet player. I have a vested interest in you as music educators, having the tools and stamina you need to do this important work, because music education changes lives. The work you do changes lives. And I just want to make it easier so it can be a joyful process for you. So thank you for showing up here. I look forward to your feedback on those Moffat. Show up next week, invite a friend. Let's build this community. I am so grateful to you. Have a fantastic weekend.